Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 16th episode of the Women's Show. I'm glad that you've been here. Please like, subscribe, and click on the notification bell so that you're reminded when we're having these conversations. Today we want to talk about the 100 days of the 11th Parliament, and we assess the progress that they have made. But also we also want to look at the Democracy Day and see, what achievements have we made as Uganda and where are we going as we move as a nation in our democracy, in our legislation, and in our growth as a unity. But most importantly, I want to invite you to welcome with me my panel for today. Next to me here is Annah. Annah is a teacher by profession. She's also a human rights activist. If you remember the massacre killings, she was one of the heads that stood with placards to call for accountability in that regard. Welcome to my panel, Annah.
Thank you so much.
And next to Annah, I have, a seasoned political activist and human rights defender, Ms. Achom Rebecca. Welcome to my panel.
Thank you.
And next to Rebecca, we have Marion. Marion is a human rights defender. Marion Kirabo, she's a human rights defender and feminist in her own right. Welcome to my panel.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so today we want to dive into this conversation. And to set us off, I want, to get a feel of what overview do you have of what has been transpiring in the 100 days of the 11th Parliament. I'll begin with you, Annah.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, our viewers. Please subscribe and like and turn on the notification button to get these episodes. Thank you for having me here. So the 100 days of the 11th Parliament, a lot has happened in the 100 days. There was the vetting of the ministers. There was the shift from the tent where they were having legislations from back to Parliament, but they're doing it in shifts right now. Yeah. The leader of opposition launched an alternative legislative agenda with 17 points. So a lot has happened in the 100 days, and we are here to talk about that.
Rebecca, what do you think is a highlight for the 100 days of that Parliament?
For me, I would want to look at the first 100 days from the perspective of how we've spent so much in just 100 days. Yeah. We've had procurement of iPads for MPs. Yeah. We've had MPs getting cars, each MP getting 100 million, right? 200 million for each MP. We've had ministers, the old ministers and the new ones, all asking for new cars. Mm-hmm. And we are questioning when we're in COVID situation. We've had Parliament agreeing to disagree to cut some of their salaries to support Ugandans in COVID relief. And for me, it was embarrassing that our own legislators did not find that important. We've also had, like she said, the opposition stand and the launch of the opposition manifesto in Parliament. We've had the case scenarios of how Parliament has been running. We've had time where we've not had the Speaker of Parliament not in office, and we've had conversations on what is happening. Is the 11th Parliament in the right track? What is going to happen for the next 5 years? And yes, so it's really been long, and also the swearing-in ceremony, yes, which was quite a scenario that we need to start questioning. Did we need to invest in all that? Yes.
And from that point, I want to bring in Marion, because we have 529 MPs, and she spoke about the spending. Right now, within the 100 days, they've spent 500 billion. What do you think, our conversation will be 5 years from now, looking at the expenditure that is going on now, 529 MPs?
Maybe I think a lot is happening in Parliament that is not necessarily to do with what they're supposed to do.
Exactly.
So when we talked about the 100 days, I was like, but what has Parliament actually done in the 100 days? So to find that, at least to the common Ugandan, it's very insignificant, that right now as we are talking, we have not talked about any law or any policy. We are talking about all the money they have spent and all that. all the drama that is going on. Perhaps what we haven't talked about is the fact that some of them are on charges of murder and how can I call it, perhaps treason that is going on. So there's so much going on, so much drama, that we have not actually, none of us can sit down and say that, okay, actually Parliament sat down on this bill, there was a debate about it, and it was very controversial, and this is what happened. Perhaps what we have talked about is COVID and the relief and all that, but it's still to do with money. Of course, you would say that Parliament's role is oversight, but even that it's doing very terribly, as we have seen. So back to your question, how does, now that I spent 500 billion, I think that number is going to triple, quadruple, and multiply itself 100% more time, because I see that there is, even when we're in a pandemic, other countries, actually MPs and ministers in other countries, we saw this even in Rwanda, you know, our neighbors, and we have seen this even in Scandinavian countries. MPs have come down to say that we are in the midst of a pandemic, government needs to spend less so that money can be prioritized to see how we can tackle the pandemic. But clearly our MPs do not have that understanding, because there are even some arguments of some ministers who they were telling, why don't you use the cars that are already there? And they're like, I want a new car. I'm entitled to a new car. So I don't think that trend is about to change, because we are even seeing that even opposition MPs who are supposed to be an example, none of them has come up to say that, you see, I don't think that I need the 100+ millions for the new car. Why don't we channel that money? All of them are very silent. I don't know, you could tell me, maybe you've had an MP going to the floor of Parliament and rejecting that.
To come in there on that point, and maybe to also push this, because they've been then having matriculation, training exercise to, you know, bring them into the fold to understand. And I'm imagining that in their circles, they're learning, you know, the business of Parliament, how the place runs, and when you were speaking about, you know, the iPads, because we spent 2 billion on the iPads, 200 million for each MP. But then I want to understand that in their trainings, they've been given the gist of what to expect for their terms of reference, and then also how to go about the business of Parliament. Are we then saying, or speaking to the fact that, one, they're most probably aloof to the realities of our times, that we are living in a pandemic, or that, you know, they're coming from an election season, and as much money as they can amass, then they will have. I don't know. I would want you to come in there, to, you know, to assess for us that conversation. Is it a matter of we don't know how this works and we would rather, you know, dive in and take as it comes, or we actually understand this, but it is what it is. We'll use the circumstances around us to benefit us.
Now, there's also something I forgot to say, that they've also gotten some millions for new attires. So whoever is working in Parliament has some money for new dressings they're wearing. So the
That's
question,
on top of the salary.
that's on top
The
of the
allowances
200
are
million that is for their cars. So you have also,
Okay.
is it 10 or 50 million for your new attires to wear? Change of wardrobe, the parliamentary wardrobe. Yeah. Now I understand why Makade is trying to question why we should have dreads in the legal fraternity. I think we need to swipe that out as well for parliamentarians. Maybe it's because they expect them to wear in some way, and that money is being given to them. So back to your question is, the problem comes that in Uganda we have monetized politics.
Yeah.
So even when
commercialized,
someone has gone into an election, they spend beyond their reach. And so when they get into Parliament, they forget they go to legislate, and so they go to spend and accumulate wealth.
They have to pay the
So
debts.
someone says the only other place you can actually get rich, apart from Hollywood, is Parliament. That Parliament, Hollywood is like Parliament. Once you're there, you're spending, you're living the celebrity life, but there's nothing good you're doing, and that's how we get to suffer. So subconsciously, our people, our voters have not understood and realized that what exactly are the roles of parliamentarians. And maybe also if you look at the journeys of how they are mentored while they get into parliament. At the beginning of this year, I had the former Right Honourable Speaker, Rebecca Kadaga, said she had started a mentorship program to mentor parliamentarians. I don't know if that is running. As a country, we have not had such a program. I've only had the hearsay of something she has done, that she intends to do. I don't know if it's running. Who are those people that are going to walk these parliamentarians into a journey of how you legislate in parliament? I think that is lacking as a country. And we could also claim that this could also be the reason why we also don't have change in presidential leadership in this country, because we have never created a space or a fallback for people to know that, okay, once I am out of parliament, this is something I can do. When I'm in parliament, this is what I should do. Many legislators have not attended these trainings, the refresher trainings in parliament, because they don't know, they don't see the essence of it. And even while going to parliament, we must acknowledge, even on swearing in, the first sitting at parliament where they were supposed to swear in the speaker, elect the speaker. We had parliamentarians who were missing. That was the first sitting of parliament. That already speaks to what was the interest of our leaders. Yes.
Maybe to bring you into this conversation, Anna, she speaks a very important role in absentia and, articulation of the issues of the people. I know for a fact that all of them have maiden speeches to, represent their constituencies, the issues that are happening, and they've all not yet been covered. We have 529 MPs, but they've not all been covered. But to speak to that, I also want to speak to the absentia of ministers. Earlier last week, the deputy speaker, had stopped and called off the sitting because the minister supposed to respond to some of the issues that were coming out within the debates weren't present. And 2 weeks of absence of not sitting speaks to something of either we are failing at having these people see parliament as a cause for the people because they represent us there and they speak the issues that happen within our constituencies. So what do you speak for, the future of such a parliament that is, ingrained with absentia of both MPs and ministers? Because I don't want to imagine that all the members of parliament were present on that day, but then also the direct ministers that are missing these sittings that should be, critical in making sure that service delivery is disseminated. What do you think of that?
Thank you so much. I think that they should be held accountable. There should be measures to cut down the absentia. If you miss, then you should be fined or something. But I see the speaker has come up with a point that they should, what do they expect to do in the next 5 years for their country? But if you have people that are missing, if you have ministers that are not showing up to give accountability, what should we really expect? It's always going to be the same thing, disappointment, and it continues to make people lose trust in the institution, in the parliament. Some of them complain that the masses don't believe in what they do, but it's not because they don't believe. We just got to a point and we are tired of the lies, we are tired of the unresolved issues, because you have ministers that are not showing up, you have MPs themselves that are not showing up. Everything is just disorganized. Unless if there is money, then that's when you see everyone is active, but they are not even saying anything. Like Marion said about the money for cars, I expected at least the very vibrant opposition people to be saying, you know what, I have a car, I don't need this, maybe this money can be allocated this side. But the high monetization of politics has put us.
What do you think would be the ideal solution to absenteeism in that house, in the August House? Because it's very important for us to know, because there are too many, and it's very hard to track everyone. And while some may be out on government business, I'm imagining for a particular day there should be, a rota of this person. What then should be the consequences of missing out on articulating issues for a whole constituency that is counting on you?
I think there should be fines if you miss, but it's going to be hard to curb the absenteeism now that they are going to be doing it in shifts. it's really going to be hard to tell who has showed up and who hasn't, because someone will just miss, and because it's a shift, the next shift is coming in next time, so you might not get that time to go and look for who missed on the other shift. So it's actually a big challenge, but it also gets back to the voters, to the people out there. We only look at elections when the time is approaching, but it's a process. People need to be empowered to know that they have to make informative decisions. Don't just vote for someone who is going to come and say what you want to hear. Vote quality. Vote someone you know is going to be there.
Yeah.
You know is going to be there and legislate and represent you. But so there is a lot that needs to be done in terms of civic education, right from the voters. You know that if someone buys you a matchbox, but you know there is someone who is better, get that matchbox, go and vote someone who is better, who is going to represent you there.
Yeah.
So the issue of absenteeism, there is a long way to go. I don't know if even fines can work, because some of the ministers have this, most of these people in those places have this "I have arrived" kind of syndrome. Like, I'm already here, you can't do anything
There is
much.
little you can do
Yeah, there is
to me.
little, what will you do? That kind of thing. So,
It is what it is.
yeah, it is what it
Marion,
is.
the 10th Parliament had business that was pending, the Succession Act and then the Sexual Harassment Act. And they were taken to the President for assent, and then he returned them and recalled them. So now it is business of the 11th Parliament. But I want to also imagine that it speaks to the women issues, because succession is an issue that we women want to see happen for us, especially in, in division of property and all these things. And then also the sexual harassment bill speaks more to us than to actually, I don't want to disqualify the issues of the men, but I want to speak because it's a women's show. What do you think should be key for the 11th Parliament in understanding how to deal with these bills to see them to their end?
Well, before I even go to government and the rest, I think like other feminists, would like to register my disappointment. Of course, I tried to look for the opposition agenda, the alternative agenda. I have only been able to find outlines. Maybe I need to look at it more. But I must register my disappointment that even with the opposition politics, the issues of women do not seem to be on their agenda. Perhaps they'll make the argument that, we have fixed them there in all these issues, but we all know that sometimes if you're not deliberate about targeting women, you might do all these wonderful policies, but they are not really helping women at all, because it's a male-dominated society. So, for example, let me say, if you're looking at education, if you're looking at more funding for education, but you have also not looked at some of the things that make women miss out, that may necessarily have to exactly do with financing, but other issues like, for example, pads, that you have provided the classroom for her, you have provided the teacher for her, she has access to a library, but perhaps she comes, you have provided free education, but she comes from a home that is very poor and cannot afford to buy her sanitary pads every day. So it will not matter if she's accessing all this, but every month she will have to miss some days of school because she cannot afford to sustain herself. You're not looking at, let me say, teenage pregnancies, that she's living in this society, but she's quite vulnerable, that even her teacher can come and actually impregnate her, and that is the end of her education, even if you provided everything to her. So there is need that even when you're looking at education, health, there is that section that you leave. How are we making sure that women do benefit from all these nice improvements that we're making? If it's to do with universal health care, are you being deliberate in making sure that maternal health gets the biggest chunk of that money? Because we know that most women are dying in hospitals because of poor maternal care. So you need to be very deliberate. So I would again register my dissatisfaction with the opposition for not being deliberate and specific. You need to be specific and you need to be deliberate. That when it comes to women, this is what we are targeting. This is how we can help them. Of course, I would like to say that unfortunately, even with the increase in the number of women in parliament, and even now that we have more women in cabinet, I'm quite skeptical about what effect it will have on the common woman. And I'm just not talking about the rural woman, even because even women in urban areas are, for example, sexual harassment does not discriminate whether you are an urban woman or you are in the village. We have seen in the highest, even in the judiciary itself. I mean that yes, that is supposed to be the epitome of justice, you know, and human rights and what. We have seen how they have handled sexual harassment cases, but then you have a parliament, and I'm not sure if we can say that the cream that has come in this year is
horrible.
understands the issues to do with gender, and even the women themselves. You will be shocked that she does not understand what even sexual harassment is, and you might not blame her so much because she has grown up in a society where it's catcalling is normalized, giving perhaps sex for other opportunities in life are normalized. It is just something that women do. You find even in these debates, if you follow them, some of them even defending that, you know, some of them even defending marital rape, because they have no understanding. This thing is natural to them. There's a lot of unlearning that needs to happen in society. I'm one of the few people who don't believe that the change comes from the legislative angle. It needs to come from down, right at the grassroots. I mean, we have an education system that in P1 teaches children gender roles, and up to now we still have teachers coming to a pupil telling them that the man is the head of the family, even if that pupil comes from a family where mom is the only parent he or she knows, and is the one that pays the school fees, and is the one that goes, works, and makes sure there is food on the table, you know? So if the patriarchy is deliberate in making sure that its systems are so entrenched that it starts schooling someone from P1, I think we feminists have to be very deliberate. Because this P1 person today, in 20 years' time or in 30 years' time, becomes the woman member of parliament.
And she will not inherit.
And she will not, for she doesn't know what feminism or you think you people are talking about. For her, since her P1, she has been told that this is the way things are. And God forbid you ever go against the status quo, because that is the end, perhaps, of even your political career. You know, we have seen feminists like Stella Nyanzi booted out, you know, and even if they are pro-women, but it's because most of the women in our society do not understand how the power structures in our society works. They know that there's a problem and they're suffering under the patriarchy, but they do not know how the patriarchy works. You know, these are concepts for us, eh?
That's easy to conceptualize.
To bring in Becky,
Yeah.
especially when she speaks on the alternative agenda and the government agenda. We have, you know, an opposition that has a whole different agenda from what government is planning, not necessarily different from what government has. Is it possible that we can come to a place where we realign these two things? And then we have NOPE as the leading political party in parliament, you know, absconding from joining the iPod. It's like, you know, we won't be part of this business until iPod is reformed. So we have an agenda that is different from the government, but necessarily not different in principle and in concerns. Can't we come to a place where we say, you know, come, let's reason together, let's work together as parliamentarians, both opposition as a waiting government and the ruling government? Do we have, you know, in the future of our parliament, a place where we can have a meeting point for these people to be able to work together to deliver for the citizens of Uganda?
I think I want to answer your question with utmost honesty. We were reaching that journey, but unfortunately now where we stand, we are at a very long journey, and we can blame this on opposition lead, because I want to speak to NUP has totally done a disservice to opposition currently, and many will disagree or agree with me on this table for the supporters of North. And I want to speak and I want to speak from a journey of understanding. We've had FDC as the leader of opposition for a very long time, but you find that when opposition stood with its business, with its formation of what opposition would speak, you didn't just pick people who had a political party interest, but who spoke for the position of opposition. Now that is where we're having a problem. I was disgruntled when I heard names like Semujunganda not getting positions in lead of opposition in opposition's lead of opposition's hierarchy. I was like, what is happening? We're having names that I don't want to say, but we have bootlickers both in government and even in opposition that will work to the interests of an individual or a section of an individual and not the interests of what opposition stands for in parliament. And so this in a way has affected the opposition and has affected how we are going to run in parliament. I keep on questioning and thinking, so now we're having, government is trying to have land reforms happening. We know it is an interest they want. I come from a region where we don't want this, the northern region. And so when I start to see that opposition is already not organized, and NUP has no energy or strength in northern Uganda, and then you start to see that they already not knowing that they don't have power capital in northern Uganda, and they are not fighting to have that capital and have people who come from that side into their space, then they're already weakening opposition. Secondly, I want to speak to merging. I think I don't also want to say we need to work with government entirely, because part of opposition's work is to call out government.
Yeah,
You don't call out when you agree with whatever people say. No. But unfortunately, you're already in bed with opposition, with government. I am so sad that we've had members of parliament in just less than 100 days already saying that, oh, okay, we voted this person, but mzee yafuga. And so my question says, is it because the other person is the one that is in positions of power, or is it because you're supposed to speak to that position of power? And so that is where opposition is failing at this point. So one of the key reflections opposition in Uganda needs to start having is how can they better understand their roles? Yeah. We have failed to understand our roles. And if we don't do this in our first year in parliament, then our next 4 years is going to be disaster. We also need to start having positions on what we need to change. We have issues like she said, and she brought it out so clearly on the issue of sexual harassment. I don't want to laugh at the members of parliament, but it's so sad that girls in Uganda can't have pads, but the lavatories and toilets in parliament are always filled with condoms. I need to make that clear statement. You will always find them filled with condoms and they'll be done. And so I don't know how sexual harassment, something that is going to protect the bodies of women and women's wellness, is questioned and critically questioned by men. That when this discussion was happening, when it was on floor, the women didn't champion this. The women legislators didn't champion this so much as the men who wanted to just decampaign and speak to their sexuality. And also, just to also be clear, the condoms that we are speaking on in parliament are not women condoms. They are male condoms. So I keep on thinking I bring this all on table because our parliament has really the highest form of patriarchy, I would say. So from a feminist thinking, that is very clear. But then also, the sexual harassment bill was passed, but it still has a lot lacking. And this is some of the tiny nitty-gritties that this parliament should start having conversations on. It could still be tabled back.
It was recalled back. It is back into parliament. And those are the two bills that they should now then start to look at, the succession and then the sexual harassment bill. They had key issues of contention that they should review to be able to pass it.
But unfortunately, the question now comes that we had a parliament, a 10th parliament, that had key people who were speaking to this bill because they were passionate about it. But because we know the politics of this country and the money and the whole issue around some of their voices being so vibrant around this, were kicked out of parliament. Yeah. Now we have a new set of women legislators who have no idea of this. And even the male legislators who have no idea of this. And so we are going into another phase, a new process of everything. Yeah. And so you start to question if is it going to work out. So One of the best things I think we just need to do as a country is to go slow on how we pass our bills. They say Uganda passes the best bills, but they're implemented in other countries. And yet those laws are not even functioning there. And so one of our key takeaways for me in this 11th Parliament is to actually have clear understandings of what we pass. Yes, as a country. Yeah.
Okay, I want to bring you Anna, and you spoke of it, you just hinted a little bit on it. For the previous for the next 2 weeks, the Right Honourable Speaker Jacob Olanya said they'll be sitting with Parliament and they'll be, having special debates on the Uganda we want. Yeah. Or the Uganda the MPs want to see. But I'm imagining the vision of the Uganda the MPs want to see is our vision. If we are coming from a place where they're our representatives, what do you think should be the focus of such a conversation, of such debates? Because these debates then will inform what will happen for us as business for our country. So what do you think should be the key focus for these MPs in articulating the issues of the people?
Thank you so much. I think the key issues should be service delivery, and to start with, check our education sector and the health sector. It's so sad that with a country that is struggling with the education system, education is not a priority in this country. Yeah. I saw one of the TV talk shows, someone saying, infrastructure, we've constructed roads, we've allocated money, we're working on roads. At this point, do we need to be talking about roads when children are getting pregnant and they are getting raped and nothing is being done? I think we should look at education and health first. Where do we see ourselves in 5 years' time? Yeah, like Marion hinted on it, the things we teach kids in school, the curriculum, it's so sad. You find in a school they are telling girls go and peel matoke, then boys can be watching soccer. We need to change the conversation. But also, it's sad to see that the Minister of Education, who is also the First Lady, stood and blamed the teenage pregnancies on poor parenting. And if you're to dig deep into these issues, you see it's not just an issue of parents. Parents will tell you, our kids were safe when they were at school. We leave them at home, we go to look for a living, and we find things have changed. There was a recent story that was run. A girl was raped 2 times. She gave birth 2 times. Yeah, and people were not even reading the article. The men were there saying, oh, she's just fertile, oh, she's spoiled. But this is a visually impaired girl who has been raped twice, got pregnant twice, and has given birth. And one of the well-wishers brought relief items and they put her on family planning. So I wondered, did she need family planning at that point? Someone who has been sexually harassed?
Yeah. And on that point, because you speak very clearly to, concerns that should be part of what the 11th Parliament are discussing now. Yeah. The future of our children and the future of, girls especially, because we are the women's show. And my questions therein is, are they articulating the girl-child issues adequately for us to be able, because they should be able to put the Ministry of Education and the minister herself in a corner where she can actually explain, and then what? They are seated home, and then what? Because they all can't afford, an international education. But because we do not have, I want to say there is lack of accountability on both our end and on our parliamentarians, because as long as there is no, that gap filling in between who is holding these MPs accountable to be able to articulate the issues of a girl child far beyond the walls of Parliament, maybe also in their oversight. So my imagination is, do you think that, going forward into these 2 weeks, should they put it at the forefront of every conversation? Because to sit and choose 2022 as a time for school to start is questionable in itself. I mean, these children have lost 2 years. So what do you think in that regard should be their pitch points?
Children are going into the 3rd year of not studying, except for those in international schools. So the legislators should look into ways schools can be reopened with following SOPs.
Yeah.
That can be done, but it's so unfortunate that money was put there to buy vaccines, to vaccinate pupils and teachers, but the money is nowhere to be seen.
Yeah.
I saw Achom sweating, the minister sweating, trying to explain where the money went, the money they put to buy the vaccines.
Yeah.
But it's another sad thing is that even the vaccines we are buying, some countries like UK are saying,
Are rejected.
we
them.
shall not count you as vaccinated
Yeah.
if you've been vaccinated in Uganda. So the legislators need to see how schools can be opened as we wait for vaccines or for a miracle to happen and COVID goes. People should go back to school.
Yeah.
We have teachers that have already given up on the profession. They have left. It is a good profession. I'm a teacher myself.
Yeah.
But how are you going to motivate these kids that have been seated home for 2 years?
2 years, going
It's
on
coming
3.
coming to 3 years. So they need to look into the issue of reopening schools.
Yeah.
2022 is very far for sure.
Indeed.
It's so far. And then also on the issue of the scholastic materials and fees. I mean, schools are in debts. You have parents also don't really have the money. The time they had reopened and paid money, schools were closed again. So there are lots of questions there that need to be addressed. So, yeah.
Let me bring you in. Let me bring Jen in there. Yes.
Just to think, something you said about education. For me, it brings something to play that education in our country has not been something that has really been a key component for this government. Yeah. That even when UPE was brought, it wasn't properly implemented, that teachers' pay were less, and that schools were not getting enough scholastic materials. So I come from an experience of working with children with disabilities. I'm a sign language interpreter. Recently, I was doing a research, and one of the key findings, we found the impact of COVID-19 on persons with disability in the employment and education, which meant we spoke with children with disabilities, we spoke with persons employed, both physical and impaired, or with disabilities in Uganda, across the region, all over Uganda. One of the key findings that were found out was that, one, children with disabilities did not get any materials, even while these learning materials were being given to what they want to call the normal schools. Children with disabilities didn't get now it would be worse for a child with visual impairments. They didn't get their Braille papers. And it even went further to government schools that claim to be inclusive of all. Government claims to be giving supplies, but supplies don't reach. And when TVs, radios, they're not there for children who don't, you can't, me, I'm visually impaired, I can only hear, I can't watch a TV. And so for the deaf, they can't see. I mean, they can't hear. They're just seeing. So how do I know mathematics? You're meaning this is A plus. And so this the education system in our country is questionable. One of the key things educationists, and the beauty is we have a lot of sadly, if you go and follow most of the CVs of most of our legislators, they have a history of being a primary teacher, a secondary teacher, a professor, a PhD, and sadly we have the worst education systems. And maybe civil society. Most of them won't say I'm a doctor, I'm a scientist. And so we need to start having conversations of a post-COVID curriculum that is able to work for young people. We need for children in our country. We need to also start thinking, Parliament itself needs to start having a post-COVID conversation on a lot of issues on education. It is to have conversations on how women, economic empowerment for women. I know Parliament has something for women on what they call the stimulus packages that are supposed to be to give support to MSS, small microfinance establishments. But the processes of what is happening is annoying. It's distasteful that you find women's circles and how they organize. They organize around small centers, and so you find that the process of receiving this money is hard. For young people, you have to form an establishment of 20 to 30 people. I'm trying to recall this. And then even the process of getting a loan from a bank. So you have to go to a World Bank or you have to go to Bank of Uganda. But then the criteria, you are trying to get a stimulus package to stimulate your businesses or to stimulate your group. but then you have to pay to get that package. So is it really it's a stimulus package? And then the percentages that come with it. And then let's go to example, Imyoga, it's still running, they say in some spaces. How it ran, they say it was a political move by government. It came in a season of COVID-19. And so
And political season.
and a political season. Thank you, Marion. And so people kept on questioning, was this really intended to actually support small businesses, or this was an agenda of the NRM government? And now currently we are having a parish model.
Here we are.
Here we are. Intandikwa came, trouble. NADS came,
Trouble.
the military took over. I keep on imagining people who are supposed to be holding guns are carrying maize sacks to go and
carrying
distribute
hoes.
and carrying
I want
hoes.
to bring you in
And,
there, Marion.
and so it's so sad.
It is very sad. And she's speaking something that we continually have this conversation on. Is the parish model going to create something different for us? But before we have that, I want to speak for the previous week was the democracy, the International Day of Democracy. And some of the issues that, continually are with us is, COVID relief, and how Parliament for the past few months has been doing an oversight role in understanding how this money has been spent. And then we have the Emioga that is going to come and is going to that has come and is very contentious. And then we have a parish model that is too much money that has been put there. But we'll have a Parliament that is going to be stuck in creating holding just these people that run these things into accountability. Where did this money go? And so I want to speak for for the levels of corruption, but then also for the implementation of such programs. Do we have a way forward on seeing if these things can actually achieve their role, so that we don't have a Parliament reduced to just oversight duty?
Okay, there are so many things in the conversation, and I just noted down, and perhaps allow me to address them after I have addressed that question. Maybe we're looking at the conversation in the wrong way.
Sure.
Perhaps we have too many expectations of Parliament itself. Because who does Parliament serve? Perhaps is the first question you should ask yourself. The many, over 200 NRM MPs, how did they come to be there? How, perhaps they have entered a system that is already rigged, no matter how many. Because even when we talk about they have not done enough to put the Minister of Education a corner, but you see what the 10th Parliament went through, trying to get, and then how do you interact with that power system? How do you then bring the First Lady and question her? It's like bringing the President
and the contradiction of her being the First Lady and the Minister of Education.
It's like bringing the President. How many times have you seen the President being called on Parliament to be questioned? And you're asking a house of over 200 NRM MPs, who probably, for some of them, he just said, you go there, I'm giving you 300 million for your election. So that's the same person you expect to question the First Lady. Then, yes, oversight. But who then implements these, let me say, these fines? Who is then in charge of making sure that this person pays? These are systems. The executive is supposed to make the decrees of Parliament work. If Parliament says, let's censor this person, who is going to make sure that that person is censored? So perhaps we over-expect too much from Parliament. Maybe the conversation should start from, okay, then the whole system is rotten, because I don't think there is much, personally there's not much that I'm going to expect from this year of corruption and what. What I know is that the more the Parliament is about to get even bigger. That's what I expect. Parliament to get bigger, expenditure to be over the top, and now with the pandemic, and you see how many multinationals are exiting the economy. I expect the economy to go down, down, down fast. So again, to your question, accountability, how do these things work? The government will continuously put money into these myogas and what, but don't be deceived that it's necessarily for your own benefit. these things will always come at a time, you know, you even just have to see at the times when they come. 5 years down the road, these things always comes towards election. So there are more of bribes at that moment, that the government has done so poorly, but it needs your vote. So in order to get your vote, they are going to put you in 2 circles, and usually the person who's going to give out the money is an NRM cadre, and usually they're going to give out money. Like for us, it was according to the NRM register. That's how they give out money.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you have lost faith in us, but for your vote, I am giving you 1 million. You get
in 2 minutes. Where do we go from here? Because I want to wrap up this conversation. We may have the cows come home.
Yeah, the cows may come home, but you're so right on this. And just to be clear on that last thing of the parish model, you bring it so clearly that our government it is a political party interest thing. Because when you look at the parish model and how its hierarchy goes, you find the chairpersons of the NRM at parish level have a position in the parish model. And so people are questioning, is this a government initiative or this is an NRM-driven agenda? Is it a way of restructuring to make sure that they still have grassroots organizing for themselves? Or is it interested in helping us grow as a country? Or is it also a new shame for them to actually get money and make it look like they are working like all the other programs? Or is it really intended to help us? And so the parish model is actually under a lot of question, especially since it has a political structure working under a government project. And so we need to start questioning. So going forward, I think, like Marion has said, we expected so much of a parliament. And
I think rightly so, as citizens of this country who voted them, we should.
That is our problem as Uganda. We should stop expecting so much of this parliament and start to actually expecting less so that they improve more.
You hold that thought. We'll end on that thought, Rebecca. And I want to thank you for joining us for this conversation. We will not stop, but at least we have something to take home. What do we expect from the 11th Parliament, especially with the interests of women at the forefront? Do we expect the parish model to deliver for us something different, or is it business as usual? Will the Minister of Education answer the key issues that are rising out of children sitting home into 2022? And those are questions we have for our 11th Parliament. I want to thank you very much, and I want to thank my dear, wonderful panel. You've been very great company for today. Thank you for coming, and thank you for always, joining these conversations and bringing the issues at hand. I've been your host. Please come, continue this conversation in the chat, and we will have you next time on our show. Thank you.